Hello, BookTube. I had a bunch of errands in downtown Boston today, in the downtown center of the city, so I just happened to be in the neighborhood of the Brattle Bookshop, and I thought I would. Just kidding. I didn't have any errands. I went back to the Brattle Bookshop this morning. I went there yesterday, but I wanted to go today and see what was new, and also uh, a couple of things. One is I had a couple of things that I was looking for. You're not supposed to. I don't like to look for things, but if I figure if I miss something in the Brattle sale lot, then I'm justified to go looking for it again the next time I'm there. And yesterday I got that volume of the letters of Taft and Roosevelt, written by Archie Butt. Uh, I got volume one, and I didn't spot it at first. I saw that in a second go around of the books out in the sale lot. So I thought, well, sure, it would be nice to have both of those with plastic coverings and with dust jackets. And if you didn't spot it the first time for volume one, maybe you've missed volume two. Maybe volume two is out there. So that was enough of a justification to go back. But also, the other justification that I have is that the sale lot of the Brattle bookstore, in case those of you don't know what I'm talking about, is gigantic. There are thousands of books out there. And that's even with one whole wall blocked off. There's little construction going on the outside facade of the wall of the shop. So one whole wall of books is blocked off. There's still an enormous number of books out there, thousands of them. Which means that even if you are at your leisure and paying attention and looking at every book, your eyes are going to gloss over things. You're going to miss things. And also the shop regularly restocks. So even if you don't miss things, you're still going to see lots of new stuff if you go. I used to go every day. So I went back. I went back to the Brattle Bookshop and I browsed and I got a pile of books. Heavy hardcovers, except for one paperback. And the paperback is so heavy that it's heavier than a couple of hardcovers. I did not find the one thing that I was looking for, volume two of the Taft Roosevelt letters. But I found a lot of other things. And I somehow lugged them all back here. So we'll go through them. Because there's no harm in talking about books. This first one is by Michael Harrison, and I have already hauled it on this channel once. And believe it or not, a House of Windsor fan, I am a big student of the House of Windsor. A House of Windsor fan out there urgently asked me for it. I thought it was so niche an interest that no one would want it but me. But the last time I showed this book on this channel, someone said, I hesitate to ask. You always make fun of this sort of thing, but I actually do live in a used book desert, and I actually don't trust vendors online. Is there any chance I could convince you to part with that book? You will see it again, and I will not. And that's true. That is absolutely true. Everything comes to the Brattle. In time, everything does. Eventually, the Brattle will provide. Most people in the world don't have a used bookstore like that, even if they have a good used bookstore. It's still not going to be as voracious an overturn as the Brattle has. There's virtually nothing that I have found over the decades. I've been going to the Brattle for well over 50 years. There's virtually nothing that I've ever found there only once. And I'm not talking about the collectible room up on the third floor. I'm talking about the bargain lot next to the store, where books are $1, $3, and $5. So I packed up the book and sent it away. And thought, well, the Brattle will provide. Sooner or later, another copy will come. No books are urgent. So sooner or later, I'll see another copy. And I did. I found one today. This is Clarence. This is Harrison's biography of Prince Albert Victor, the heir to Queen Victoria's eldest son. So the heir to King Edward, my King Edward. Tall, very handsome, remarkably stupid, even for the Saxe-Coburg line, remarkably stupid. And very picturesque. Someone that you could definitely tour through the provinces to the redounding credit of the royal family. And he died. He died very young, unexpectedly, of pneumonia. So, and he had been tangentially maybe implicated in a scandal during his day, and then he was posthumously implicated in an even bigger scandal when a couple of authors, one in particular, posited the absolutely crackpot idea that he was Jack the Ripper. It even made its way onto the cover of this book. He was Prince Albert Victor was the Duke of Clarence and Avondale, I think, was his whole title. And he couldn't tie his own shoes. He certainly couldn't kill women, get away with it scot-free, and taunt Scotland Yard. Yeah, so, but he is an interesting subject, and there is enough material, even with the vetted records that we have now. We will never know the full extent. I don't think we will ever know the full extent of his involvement in the scandal that was connected with his name and his father's name during his own lifetime. Not because those records have been destroyed. They exist. The House of Windsor doesn't destroy anything unless they absolutely have to. But because they're going to sit on them just forever. So this is probably the best biography of this weird, enigmatic, and sad figure. His parents put him on the marriage market, and even though he'd been a bit of a dandy, a bit of a man about town once he was a teenager, they put him on the marriage market. They found the right fiancée. They had her shipped over to England. They seemed to get on well. His fiancée was Princess May. She was tall and beautiful and extremely intelligent. So it wasn't all that good a match. But then he got pneumonia, and she had the 1-2 humiliation. Part one of her ultimate humiliation was that in his delirium on what turned out to be his deathbed, he was calling out the name of one of the women that he had a liaison with, not her name. And humiliation 1-2 punch number 2 is that she was then handed off like used crockery to his brother, who was now the heir apparent. She became Queen Mary. This is still the best book on the subject, and now I have another copy. Sure enough, the Brattle did provide. Then a nice hardcover copy here of something that I have read many, many times. Enough times. I don't think there's an ebook of it, so I haven't. I've read it enough times to know that I go back to it when I want, and only I've ever had the hardcover. I found I have the paperback. I found the hardcover of Crossing Open Ground by Barry Lopez, a series of natural world reflections. Any of you have read his book Arctic Dreams, or if you're lucky enough at your used bookstore to ever come across a copy of his book Of Wolves and Men. I can't remember the last time I came across a copy of that book. I would really like a copy of that book, but the Brattle will provide. There were no other Barry Lopez books out in the sale lot today, but there was this one, and I love it. I'm a big fan of this author. I still kick myself. He wrote a big book a couple of years before he died, and it crossed my desk. It entered the Christian Science Monitor's book room right at a time when I was pretty much calling my own docket. I had to confer with my editor, but she, except in rare instances, was going to defer to my judgment. And I didn't do it. I didn't write about that book, and I wish I had. He would have seen the review, and I wish I had. But that doesn't preclude me loving him, and I really love the elegance of his nature writing books like Winter Count or anything like that. And I'm glad to have a hardcover of Crossing Open Ground, especially since somebody took such good care of it. It's in perfect condition. It's got a covering on it and everything. Then we have the one paperback, the one lone paperback. I had a hardcover of this just this year. I hauled it. And again, sent it out. Again, one of you contacted me and said, oh boy, that is more. I perked up when I saw that on your haul. I would so much like that copy, but I don't want to deprive you of it. All I want to know is if you see another copy someday at the Brattle, would you grab it for me? And my response to that, to a thing like that, is usually just to say what I said in this case, which is, just let me send you this one. Don't put it on me to remember. Just let me send you this one. It's really no big deal. I read this when it came out. I reviewed it. I sang its praises, as did everybody else. I've referred to it many, many times. The fact that I don't have a copy at the moment is immaterial. I will see another one, and you will not. So let's just do that. And fortunately, the person agreed with that. This is Maynard Mack, the great Maynard Mack, and this is his great book, his life of the poet Alexander Pope. This is a paperback, but I don't mind. It does not hardcover, but that's okay. It's, believe me, it's as heavy as a hardcover, and it is just the way a biography of any literary figure should be done. It's got a very sensitive ear to the literature, which can be rare, and is often poor. It's often poorly done. And it's also wonderful about the sprawling life and times element of a biography. So it's Pope's whole world, and that is terrific. I don't know how many other biographies of Alexander Pope there have been, but it's ridiculous how overclassed they are. I mean, this is totally in a world of its own in terms of its genius. Okay, then I found this has a little bit of a story to it, as all these books do. I saw this copy come into the shop, I think in the early part of the summer this year, and well, actually, it'll say, won't it? It'll say when it came in. Yeah, July. I saw this come in, and I took a picture of it, and I posted the picture on Instagram, on my rollicking Instagram account, Steve's Bookstagram, and said what I always say with pictures from the Brattle. Hey, this just arrived. It's terrific. If you're interested in the subject, you really should grab it. And I thought no more of it. I am such a sexy influencer with wavy blue-black hair and a snub nose and a sharp jawline and come-hither eyes and a smoldering gaze and an 8-pack abs and A-frame shoulders, and also, if I may say so, a pert behind. I just assumed that because I'm an influencer of such a degree, all I had to do was post it and a person would buy it. I just assumed that I need not look over my shoulder. I promoted it and it is now gone. And then I was wandering on the shelves today. I did a little shopping inside the shop and I saw it there. No one bought it. I understand why it's extremely abstruse, but it is brilliant. And I was staring at it and thinking, my first reaction was an influencer reaction. It was, how dare you? How dare you not buy something that I recommended? And then my second reaction was, oh, come now, Smedley. You can't ask them to be interested in this. And then my third reaction was, wait a minute, I don't have a copy. So I grabbed it. This is Carithers. This is Donne at Sermons. This is Gail Carithers' great book on the religious side of John Donne. I mean, he is a favorite among poetry favors for his poetry. But I think it's unlikely that on his deathbed, if you'd asked him, Donne would have said that he considered himself a poet. I think it's unlikely that he would have been happy knowing that he lives as a poet and rather than as a sermonizer, a godbotherer. And that's what this book is all about. And Carithers is unsparing. Oh my. He's thrilling to read. Actually, a lot like Maynard Mac. I bet they knew each other. But Carithers he's unsparing. When Donne steps out of line, when Donne writes something dumb or something doctrinally that he disagrees with, he bashes him with both feet. But that just makes this more thrilling to read. Okay, none of you, I admit it, it's a theological study of John Donne's sermons from the pulpit. So perhaps I was being a little optimistic in expecting anyone to rush to the phone to call the Brattle and get a copy. But it fascinates me. So now I have it. It's a classic. If you were to make a shelf of Donne books that you absolutely must have, there's one great edition of his poems. There's one great biography. There's this thing. That would not be a big shelf. Okay, then we have two books of a type. I'm assuming they came from the same person. They are World War II books, and they are naval books. But they're more than that. They're admiral biographies. They're sailing man biographies. Which has atavistic interest to me. You could certainly say that in the formative years of my interest in World War II, I was, let's just say, influenced to concentrate on the Navy, on the United States Navy during World War II, especially the Navy in the Pacific, especially the Navy against the Empire of Japan and its mariners, who were some of the best trained and most brave and skillful fighting seamen in the history of the world. They not generally like the thugs afloat, as one historian referred to the German Navy. let's just say when I was first becoming interested in reading about World War II, I was strongly influenced over wine and calzones to concentrate on the operations of the U.S. Navy. And it has only been through steady mental effort over decades uh, that I have pushed away from that and looked at land-based operations, looked at especially the war in Western Europe, the war on the Western Front, thinking and saying for a long time that, well, yeah, it's all well and good to study aircraft carriers, but if you want to talk about the defeat of Nazi Germany, you want to talk about the defeat of Nazi Germans. And that happened on land in the Ardennes. That did not happen at sea. But there were two wars going on, right? There were two wars going on. The Allies were fighting the Nazis, yes, but the Empire of Japan had attacked the United States, which Nazi Germany never did. So, and the war with Japan was almost necessarily 90% naval. So I found not one but two admiral biographies here, and I just had to grab them. I don't know that I've read either one of them. Now, the first one here is by E.B. Potter, and he wrote a biography of Admiral Halsey that was very good, and he wrote a biography of Admiral Nimitz that was amazing. I wish I could find that book. I did not know that he wrote a biography of Admiral Burke. I didn't know that he did that. This is a lovely design little thing. This is going to be one. I love the way this guy writes. So this is news to me. And Burke has a great story. There's a great his story, the story of him being transferred to the command of an admiral that he didn't much like, and they weren't the same, and they weren't happy. Neither one of them was happy about it. Was a story that that Samuel Eliot Morison loved telling, and that's because it's a really good one. They learned to like each other. There was a lot of high level hand wringing and order giving in the naval department in the Pacific about where we want our specialties to be and how much we want them to be intermixed. Because you've got aircraft carriers, that means you need aviators and aviator commanders who must be themselves aviators. But we're also doing surface naval battles, lots of them. And so you need surface naval commanders as well, people who understand the lay of the land and the lay of the water. And those are two different birds. But you can't absolutely specialize. If you have a task force, a flotilla that is only good at aerial combat, well, what happens if they encounter high seas or an enemy at sea? You need to intersperse their commanders, in other words, and you also need to intersperse the admirals who are good at the big picture and the admirals who like to kill people. And Burke was an admiral who liked to kill people. He was a fighting admiral, very much so, and he was penitent to an admiral who was not. This is going to be fascinating. This is going to be as fun as a novel. I'm sure that it will be. And the other admiral biography that I got is a classic. I have seen this reprinted in a naval classic line with, the uniform spines and everything. And I've also been told over and over again that it is a classic of naval biography and that I really should read it. Never have. I think because I was waiting for a dust jacket that wasn't just a naked hardcover in a series. And this particular dust jacket, I need not have waited on. It's not all that much to write home about. This is The Quiet Warrior. A biography of Admiral Spruance, who was very much the other kind, very much a 30,000-foot big picture admiral. The Quiet Warrior is a classic, a minor classic of naval biography, and now I have it in an individual form anyway. I would never have thought in a million years that I would come across this with a painted cover. Never in a million years. But these two go together. These two knew each other. They were very different kinds of fighters. So that's fantastic. I touched the base with World War II. Then, okay, we can move from World War II to the 1980s. The epic 1980s. And the first of these is a book that I have been hoping to find at the Brattle. Because this author is great. Frances Fitzgerald is the author. A lot of you will know her from her book Fire in the Lake about Vietnam, that won every award in the world, made her briefly a sensation in the world of nonfiction writing. All of this is nonfiction. Everything here is nonfiction because we're headed up to nonfiction November. I'm not going to dally with fiction at this late date. But I confess, I mean, I knew what a huge sensation Fire in the Lake was. I read it. I didn't really like it all that much. I liked the way the author wrote, but I didn't like the subject or any of the emphases. The balances of the book seemed all off to me. But she wrote a book that I read from a library and loved. Did I love it? It had all of her historical ability, but a lot more of her humor, a lot more of her wry dystopian way that writers could write about the 1980s. And I found it today out in the sale lot for like $1. It's this. It's Way Out There in the Blue. And it is the story. It's the story of Ronald Reagan, and it's the story of Reagan's presidency. It actually doubles as that. It does a real good job of doubling for that without any syrup or schmaltz at all. But the title refers to the focus of the book, which is SDI, a weapon system that Ronald Reagan maniacally pushed the whole of his time in office, that is better known colloquially as Star Wars. And that was viewed at the time by every commentator outside the Beltway as the biggest multi-billion-dollar boondoggle that had ever been foisted on the Defense Department. And the focus of this book is on that, but this is delightful to read. It is, like I mentioned with John Donne, Reagan generates a lot of books, lots and lots of books, and there aren't many of them that are worth reading. There certainly aren't many of them that are worth rereading or keeping. The shelf for Ronald Reagan, I always talk about this mythical shelf of the books to have on some subject or person. The shelf for Ronald Reagan, believe it or not, I know it sounds ironic because there have been millions of books on him, but the shelf for Ronald Reagan is very small. It's very small. You have to be very selective. There aren't many books on that shelf, and this is one of them. I was overjoyed to find this. And as long as we're dealing with monsters from the 1980s, I also found this, a UK hardcover of John Campbell's Iron Lady. John Campbell wrote a multi-volume biography of Margaret Thatcher, and this is the one that covers the 11 years when she was Prime Minister. This is the one that covers when she was another of those giants bestriding the world in the 1980s. And keep in mind, when I say that, I am not being pie-eyed. It's very bad for normal-sized people when giants stride the earth. It's not good for them. It's very bad for them. But it makes for, fantastic reading. It makes for fantastic reading. It didn't make for fantastic reading of the daily news headlines in the papers at the time. But now, and Campbell is so good. He is such a good writer. I've shown on this channel many times before another volume of his, and also perhaps a memoir that he had a very strong hand in. And this is just him cutting loose. This is so witty and wise. Such a wonderful book that it was an 80s twofer. So I got 2 Admirals, 2 80s. Let's see here. Oh, there's another twofer here. Okay, well, the first one is a little bit odd. I don't know why I grabbed it, except that it was cheap. This is Telling Times. This is the occasional prose of Nadine Gordimer. This was a review copy. This was sent to somebody, not me. When was this? 2010. So I was back in the reviewing game by then, but I didn't get this book. Nadine Gordimer is one of those 20th century authors that I feel a little guilty not liking. I don't have any guilt for not liking Alice Munro. Even when she was tromping all over the literary landscape with everyone and his brother calling her great, I was saying, no, she's not. She's competent as a writer on the prose on the page, but her stories are incredibly boring. Every one of them is incredibly boring, and a boring story is a bad story, no matter how efficiently the person writes English. But not many people listen to me. But there were 2 other figures. There was Doris Lessing and Nadine Gordimer, who I couldn't say that about. I could say that they were really good writers, but I couldn't say that their stuff was boring. But it never worked with me. It never lodged on me at all. I would once upon a time have said 3 figures. I would once upon a time have said Doris Lessing, Nadine Gordimer, and Iris Murdoch. But thanks to one of you sent me almost everything by Iris Murdoch in exactly the format that I like, big orange spine trade paperbacks. And I have been making behind the scenes. I don't talk about all my reading on this channel, believe it or not, so I never shut up about reading. Behind the scenes, I've been doing a systematic reread of Iris Murdoch, and I'm a long way from done, but I know already that old... I didn't even dismiss her. I didn't say she was bad. I just thought her books were wordy, pointlessly so. And so I didn't like her. I very much like her now, and I'm sure that by the end of that systematic reread, which has to end in just 2 months, I will really like her. I don't know about love. I haven't yet hit anything that I love. But I'm in the same boat as I was at the beginning of that read-along with these two, with Nadine Gordimer and Doris Lessing. I would have grabbed this anyway because she's writing about books here. She's writing about literary events, the politics of her time, the fatwa against Salman Rushdie. So I would have grabbed this anyway, but I'm looking forward. I'm hoping that it will be a doorway into her fiction at some point for me to reread her fiction and like it. And then we have, let's see, I got this thing. I got it because it's in perfect condition. It's big and beautiful, and it's got, somebody put a covering on it. It's the Shorter Pepys. Robert Latham's, I know this thing's huge, it's like 1,000 pages long, but it is the Shorter Pepys. He goes through Pepys's diary and gives a far more comprehensive and generous selection from those diaries than the previous, Everybody's Pepys or Shorter Pepys or whatnot had ever been. With a lot more critical apparatus. So it's a little bit tough. Samuel Pepys wrote a diary. He kept a diary for 10 years, and it's utterly remarkable. It's like no other diary ever written. It's amazing to read, but if you read the unabridged Pepys diary, you will see why there are abridged versions. Because the unabridged version has many, many, many entries that are either gibberish or are just bullet point reminders to himself. Your journal probably has entries like that as well. You don't want to include those. I mean, a big unabridged Pepys, sure, you want to include those and footnote them, but they don't make for reading at all, any kind of reading. So you really need to abridge Pepys's diaries. It's just once you start reading them, you love them, and you want as much from the diaries as possible that is narrative in any way. And a lot of the Shorter Pepyses, they cut out all the stuff that's not narrative, all the stuff that's gibberish or notes to himself or shorthand. They cut out all of that, but then they start cutting out stuff that isn't that, rather than going to the bother of annotating it so that it makes sense. And Latham doesn't do that. So this is the Pepys volume to have if you're not going to embark on the unedited, and you shouldn't embark on the unedited unless you want to be pretentious at parties. And you don't want to do that, now do you? Anyway, we'll finish up with the American Revolution, because I was all over the map here. I did the 80s, I did World War II, I also did the American Revolution. I found Donne Gerlach. I don't know that I've ever read this. I found a biography of Philip Schuyler, a figure from the a general in the American forces, the American Revolution, who I don't know that I've ever read a biography of him. Oh, that's not true. I think I read one that was written like 150 years ago, the American Statesman series. I think they had a volume on Schuyler. Or it was something like that. It wasn't that series, it was something like that. But a modern scholarly biography? No, not at all. I have shouted his name many, many times in the face of blind hero worshippers of George Washington. I've shouted his name when they repeat Flexner's term for Washington as an indispensable man. And when later commentators, as a couple have done in the last 2 years alone, say there was really no one else who could have done what Washington did. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. General Gage could have. General Arnold could have if he hadn't been a traitor. General Schuyler could have. Washington wasn't indispensable. He was just really tall. That's all. This is going to be wonderful to read. I wonder how much I'll learn. And that was one book in the American Revolution, and then the second book in the American Revolution is a perfect example of the Brattle will provide, which is saying something. Let me tell you the story, the long, boring, tedious story. The other day, the Bean and I were out and about, and we came across a little free library. And I found a copy of The Great Rehearsal by Carl Van Doren in one of those Time Inc. trade paperbacks that are so stiff you can barely read them. One of you left a comment saying that you have managed to successfully read yours over and over again without breaking them apart because you've been very careful about it. I envy that. Because they're great books, and a lot of them have not had any other popular edition. So I showed you that on it was just a couple of days ago that I showed you that, and I mentioned what I wouldn't give to find a copy of Carl Van Doren's biography of Benjamin Franklin with a dust jacket. I mentioned that I often see it without one, but I want it with one. And the Brattle was listening because not only did I find a copy of Carl Van Doren's biography of Franklin with a dust jacket, but I found a really affordable copy of this gorgeous box set of the thing. Look at this. There's the young Franklin there. Incredible. Look at this. Look at how beautiful that is. It's got the cloth bookmark and everything. There's the Pennsylvania Gazette as the end papers. Fine by me. I like box sets anyway. The only problem is that if Mark Richardson was drawn to this video by the mention of admirals, he might now still be here to see me try to get this back in the box. I'm not particularly good about that. I'll be really careful so I don't give him a coronary. But there you go. There is the Carl Van Doren Benjamin Franklin. So I no sooner needed to mention it than it showed up at the Brattle. So there you go. Another Brattle trip. We have Carl Van Doren's biography of Benjamin Franklin in a gorgeous, it must be a book club of some kind. Do any of you recognize that? What does that mean? It must be a book club of some kind. Let's see here. Philip Schuyler. Philip Schuyler in a biography, a forgotten general of the American Revolution. Telling Times, Nadine Gordimer's occasional prose. The Shorter Pepys, in a hardcover like this. This exact text, same selection, same notes, same introduction, is the text of the Penguin Classic Shorter Pepys. But you can't put any clippings in a Penguin Classic Shorter Pepys. The Penguin Classic is just a trade paperback. This is a lot more durable, especially for something. I go back to Pepys a lot, and it's not always the everybody's Pepys. Then John Campbell's Margaret Thatcher volume. I don't really want the first volume where she's a greengrocer's daughter and she lies her way into Parliament, but this one I want. We have way out there in the blue, a Ronald Reagan biography worth having. We have The Quiet Warrior about Admiral Spruance. We have Admiral Arleigh Burke, another Admiral biography. I can't do it. I block the camera. We have Donne at Sermons. How amazing. Infuriating that none of you bought it at my command, but it was there for me. We have Maynard Mack's biography of Alexander Pope in a nice, heavy trade paperback. I don't think I need a hardcover of it. We have Crossing Open Ground by Barry Lopez. Lovely, lyrical stuff. And finally, Clarence, poor Clarence, a biography of Prince Albert Victor. So there you go. Another Brattle trip. So there will not be a Brattle trip tomorrow. but that was a lot of fun to do today. I didn't find the thing I was looking for, but I found a ton of other stuff that I want. So, and again, the goal here is keepers or quick turn through. Is there for instance, the Philip Schuyler book. Probably I won't keep that. It'll just be the learning experience of reading it. That's all. Unless it's fantastic, I probably won't keep it. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.